Imagine this. The same person who helped put you on, who brought you into the industry, is now forced to defend himself while the streets stay silent. This isn't just a rap drama anymore. This is a loyalty test. When Pooh Shiesty first exposed Gucci Mane, many people thought it was just another internet rumor. But what's happening now? It's turning serious. Gucci Mane's response, or more importantly, his silence, has sparked conversations from Memphis all the way to Atlanta. One question is echoing everywhere: who's really wrong here? Gucci Mane didn't just sign Pooh Shiesty. He made him part of his legacy. But when power, money, and fame get involved, true intentions always come to light. Industry insiders are now saying labels are applying pressure, camps are dividing, and things that were once handled behind closed doors are becoming public. The streets are watching closely. Who's speaking up? Who's staying quiet? And in hip-hop, silence is a statement. Is Gucci Mane protecting his image, or is there something deeper he can't talk about yet? Meanwhile, Pooh Shiesty's supporters believe the truth is finally out. Gucci Mane's side insists the real story hasn't been told. But one thing is clear: this fallout is bigger than two artists. It's a warning to the entire industry. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the streets are choosing sides and why this beef is far from over. Starting exactly where the hook left off, what makes this situation even heavier is the timing. Pooh Shiesty isn't speaking from a place of hype or clout chasing. He's speaking at a moment when his voice carries weight, even in silence. And when someone like that points fingers at the very person who helped build their career, the culture is forced to stop and listen. For years, Gucci Mane has been known as a kingmaker. From Waka Flocka to Young Thug to Pooh Shiesty, Gucci's reputation has been built on spotting raw street talent and turning it into mainstream power. So when Pooh Shiesty came into the picture under 1017 records, it felt like history repeating itself. Memphis had found its next star, and Gucci Mane was once again positioned as the mastermind behind the rise. At least, that's how it looked from the outside. Behind the scenes, according to people close to the situation, things weren't as smooth as fans believed. Contracts, expectations, and control started becoming real topics of tension. Pooh Shiesty wasn't just another artist. He was becoming a brand, a movement, and a voice for a new generation. And with that kind of momentum, questions always start to surface. Who really owns what? Who's benefiting the most? And who's being held back? Sources say that as Pooh Shiesty's popularity grew, communication between him and Gucci Mane reportedly changed. What once felt like mentorship slowly started to feel like business-only interaction. Decisions were being made without full transparency, and frustration began to build quietly. In hip-hop, that kind of silence is dangerous, because when it finally breaks, it breaks loudly. That brings us to the moment when Pooh Shiesty decided to expose what he felt had been hidden for too long. He didn't come out yelling or ranting. Instead, the tone was cold, controlled, and intentional. That alone told people this wasn't an emotional outburst. This was calculated. And the streets noticed. Fans immediately began revisiting old interviews, lyrics, and social media posts. Every Gucci Mane quote suddenly felt different. Every Pooh Shiesty bar sounded like it had hidden meaning. What once seemed like loyalty now felt questionable. Was Gucci Mane really supporting his artist fully, or was he protecting his own empire first? Then came Gucci Mane's reaction, or lack of one. In hip-hop history, responses are usually loud. Diss tracks, interviews, Instagram posts, something. But Gucci Mane didn't rush to clear the air. And that silence hit harder than any diss could. Because when a veteran stays quiet while accusations are flying, people start assuming there's something to hide. Some insiders believe Gucci Mane is being strategic. As a seasoned industry figure, he understands that anything he says could be used against him legally, publicly, or financially. Others argue that silence is a power move, meant to remind everyone who holds the real leverage. But to the streets, silence feels like avoidance. And that's where sides begin forming. Memphis fans largely stand with Pooh Shiesty, seeing him as someone who stayed true to his roots while navigating an industry designed to exploit talent. Atlanta loyalists, on the other hand, continue to defend Gucci Mane, pointing to his long history of putting artists on and giving them opportunities they might never have had otherwise. But this isn't just Memphis versus Atlanta. This is artist versus label, student versus teacher, and in many ways, generation versus generation. Younger artists are watching closely because this situation reflects fears they've had for years, the fear of being signed, packaged, and controlled, only to be discarded once the value is extracted. There's also the legal shadow hanging over everything. Pooh Shiesty's circumstances add another layer of complexity. Some believe his position makes it easier for others to speak for him or against him without immediate pushback. That imbalance of power is something fans can't ignore. Meanwhile, industry executives are reportedly uneasy. Situations like this don't just affect two names, they make artists question deals, trust, and alliances. When a high-profile mentorship publicly fractures, it sends a message. Nothing is guaranteed, no matter how close things look on camera. Gucci Mane's camp insists that the full story hasn't been told yet. They claim that loyalty goes both ways and that certain responsibilities weren't met. They argue that being signed comes with structure, rules, and boundaries, not just freedom and fame. From that perspective, what Pooh Shiesty sees as control might be discipline. But Pooh Shiesty's supporters see it differently. To them, this is a classic case of an artist outgrowing the system that introduced him. They believe his voice was being limited, his timing controlled, and his potential delayed for reasons that had nothing to do with music. And that's the real tension here. Because when an artist feels delayed, silenced, or managed too tightly, resentment builds. And when resentment finally meets opportunity, exposure becomes inevitable. As the conversation grows louder online, more artists are subtly weighing in, liking posts, unfollowing accounts, or dropping cryptic captions. In today's culture, those small actions speak volumes. Nobody wants to be the first to speak openly, but everyone is paying attention. What's clear is this: the relationship between Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane is no longer just business. It's personal. And personal conflicts in hip-hop rarely end quietly. This isn't the climax yet, it's the foundation. Because in the next phase, the details get sharper, the accusations get clearer, and the pressure forces responses that can't be avoided anymore. Whether Gucci Mane chooses to speak or continues staying silent, the streets are already forming their conclusions. And once the streets decide, there's no going back. And once the streets decide, there's no undo button. Because at that point, the narrative becomes bigger than facts. It becomes belief. That's exactly where this situation moves next, when quiet tension turns into visible cracks and subtle moves start speaking louder than words. Not long after the fallout became public, fans began noticing small but telling changes. Old photos disappeared. Mutual follows quietly vanished. Affiliates who once shouted out both sides suddenly chose careful wording or none at all. In hip-hop, these aren't coincidences. They're signals. Behind the scenes, sources claim meetings were happening. Lawyers, label reps, and managers all stepped in, trying to control the damage before it spiraled further. Because once a story like this escapes the artist level and reaches the business side, the stakes multiply fast. Contracts don't just represent music, they represent millions, branding deals, and long-term leverage. What complicated everything even more was Pooh Shiesty's position. His absence from the public gave the situation a strange imbalance. He couldn't jump on Instagram Live. He couldn't do interviews. That meant others could speak about him without immediate correction. Supporters argue that this made his earlier words hit even harder because they weren't followed by noise, just silence and consequence. At the same time, Gucci Mane's silence continued. No direct statements. No clear denial. And for a culture built on response, that felt unsettling. Some fans began interpreting his quiet approach as confidence, the calm of someone who knows the truth will eventually surface. Others saw it as a calculated stall, buying time while the narrative cooled down. But it didn't cool down. Instead, industry insiders began hinting that the disagreement wasn't about respect alone, it was about control. Release schedules. Approval power. Long-term ownership. These are the real fault lines that rarely get discussed publicly, yet destroy partnerships behind closed doors. When an artist feels boxed in, creativity turns into frustration. When a label feels challenged, authority tightens. According to people close to the situation, Pooh Shiesty wanted more autonomy. More say, more freedom to move when momentum was hot. From his perspective, time mattered. In modern hip-hop, delays can kill careers faster than bad music. Every pause risks losing attention, relevance, and connection with the audience. From the label side, the argument is different. Structure protects longevity. Timing protects value. Moves must be strategic, not emotional. And when rules aren't followed, consequences follow. This is where mentorship ends and management begins, and where relationships often fracture. As these two mindsets collided, loyalty became the weapon both sides used. Supporters of Gucci Mane pointed out that opportunities don't come free. Being introduced to the industry comes with expectations. They argued that gratitude matters, and that success doesn't erase obligation. Pooh Shiesty's supporters countered with a different question. At what point does gratitude turn into silence? At what point does loyalty mean speaking up instead of falling in line? That question spread fast. Suddenly, this wasn't just about two artists. Younger rappers began watching closely, reading between the lines. Because almost every artist fears the same thing, being locked into a deal that benefits everyone except themselves. And seeing a high-profile situation like this unfold validated those fears. Meanwhile, the media poured gasoline on the fire. Headlines exaggerated. Clips were taken out of context. Every lyric Pooh Shiesty ever recorded was reanalyzed like evidence. Every Gucci Mane quote from years ago resurfaced with new interpretation. Truth became harder to separate from narrative. And then came the reactions from the camps. People associated with both sides began speaking indirectly. Not names. Not confirmations. Just vague posts about loyalty, betrayal, and fake love. But everyone knew exactly who they were talking about. In today's culture, indirect shots often do more damage than direct ones because they invite speculation. At this stage, the pressure was unavoidable. Gucci Mane now faced a dilemma. Speaking could escalate things. Staying silent could make him look guilty. Either move came with risk. For someone who has survived multiple industry eras, this wasn't unfamiliar territory, but the optics were different now. Social media doesn't wait. Fans demand immediacy. For Pooh Shiesty, the situation was equally complex. His supporters were loud, but his voice remained limited. That created a vacuum where others shaped the story for him, sometimes accurately, sometimes not. And once a story is shaped enough times, even the truth struggles to break through. What made this phase dangerous was trust erosion. Not just between two individuals, but between artists and the system. When fans began saying, "This is why you can't trust labels," the damage extended far beyond one brand or one name. Executives noticed. Other artists noticed. And behind closed doors, deals began getting questioned. Clauses reread. Lawyers consulted. Because if this could happen here, it could happen anywhere. At the same time, some voices urged caution. They reminded fans that mentorship is complicated. That business disagreements don't always equal betrayal. That not every fallout needs a villain. But those voices struggled to compete with emotion, and emotion always spreads faster. As weeks passed, one thing became undeniable. Whatever relationship once existed between Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane was no longer reparable in public. Even if private conversations were happening, the damage to perception was already done. And perception in hip-hop is reality. This phase wasn't about explosion yet. It was about pressure. Tight, constant, suffocating pressure, forcing decisions that could no longer be delayed. Silence stopped being neutral. Every move, or lack of one, became a statement. The question wasn't if someone would finally speak. It was when and how hard. Because once the next words drop, once the next detail leaks, this story won't be about speculation anymore. It'll be about consequences. Real ones. Career-shifting ones. And that's where everything officially crosses the line. And once silence fails, there's no controlling what comes next. That's the stage this situation finally enters, the moment where quiet strategy collapses under public pressure, and every move carries consequences that can't be taken back. The breaking point didn't arrive with a single explosive statement. It came in pieces. First, there was the shift in tone. Fans noticed that conversations around Gucci Mane changed. The respect was still there, but it was now mixed with skepticism. People weren't asking what he had done. They were asking why he wasn't responding. In hip-hop culture, veterans are expected to address situations head-on. Silence, once seen as power, was now being interpreted as avoidance. At the same time, Pooh Shiesty's name kept trending, not because of music, but because of implication. His earlier words began to feel heavier as time passed without rebuttal. Supporters argued that if the claims were false, they would have been shut down immediately. The longer the quiet stretched, the more it worked against Gucci Mane's image. That's when alliances started cracking. Artists loosely connected to both camps began making clearer choices. Studio collaborations stopped being teased. Event appearances became selective. Even producers, who usually stay neutral, were rumored to be choosing who they worked with more carefully. None of this was announced, but all of it was noticed. Behind the scenes, pressure reached its peak. The moment everything truly crossed the line came when people inside the industry began speaking anonymously. Podcasts hinted at mentors holding artists back. Commentators referenced classic control tactics. While no names were officially confirmed, the timing made it obvious who they were talking about. That was the point of no return. Gucci Mane's legacy, once defined purely by influence and opportunity, was now being debated. Not erased, not denied, but questioned. And for someone who built his name on credibility in the streets and respect in the industry, that kind of conversation hits deeper than any diss track. Meanwhile, Pooh Shiesty's image evolved into something else entirely. He wasn't just seen as an artist anymore, he was being framed as an example. A warning story. Someone younger artists could point to and say, "This is what happens when business and loyalty collide." That role came with weight. Supporters framed him as someone who spoke up knowing the risks. Critics argued that airing issues publicly burns bridges that can't be rebuilt. But even critics admitted one thing: once the truth, or even the idea of truth, is out, it can't be unspoken. The industry reaction was quiet, but serious. Labels became more cautious. Executives reportedly asked tougher questions during negotiations. Artists demanded clearer terms. The ripple effect was real. Situations like this don't just damage relationships, they reshape behavior. And that's why this fallout mattered beyond headlines. For Gucci Mane, the challenge became containment. Not damage control, containment. How do you protect a legacy without escalating a conflict? How do you respond without validating claims? Every option had a downside. For Pooh Shiesty, the challenge was representation. His supporters spoke loudly, but without his direct voice, the narrative continued evolving without full confirmation. That absence gave the story power, but also risk. Because stories shaped by others rarely stay accurate. As the weeks passed, one thing became clear: reconciliation was no longer realistic in the public eye. Even if private understanding existed, the optics were too fractured. Trust, once questioned, doesn't rebuild easily, especially under a spotlight. And then came the final shift. People stopped asking what happened and started asking what's next. That's the real signal that a story has moved past explanation and into consequence. Fans speculated about future moves. Would Gucci Mane finally address it? Would Pooh Shiesty's side release more details? Would someone else step in and expose everything? At this stage, even a small statement would hit like an explosion. Because silence had built expectations too high. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about survival, of image, of credibility, of long-term positioning. In hip-hop, careers aren't always ended by mistakes. Sometimes they're reshaped by perception. And perception had already locked in. The streets weren't undecided anymore. They had chosen sides, not necessarily based on proof, but based on feeling. And in this culture, feeling often outweighs facts. That's the real consequence of this fallout. Not a diss record. Not a lawsuit. Not even a public argument. but a permanent shift in how two names are mentioned in the same sentence. Gucci Mane and Pooh Shiesty will always be linked, not just by history, but by this moment. A moment where mentorship met resistance, where silence met suspicion, and where loyalty stopped being assumed. This is where the story settles, not with closure, but with division. Because some fallouts don't end loudly. They end with distance. And in hip-hop, distance speaks louder than words. If you've been watching this story unfold, now is the moment to speak up, because situations like this don't just disappear, they shape the culture. This isn't only about Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane. It's about loyalty, power, and what really happens behind the scenes in the music industry. So here's the question. Whose side are you on and why? Was this a case of an artist finally standing up for himself, or a mentor being misunderstood in a business-driven industry? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because the streets are already talking, and your voice is part of that conversation. If you believe artists deserve more transparency, hit the like button. It helps this story reach people who care about what really goes on beyond the music. And if you don't want to miss the next breakdown, where we reveal the long-term impact of this fallout and what it means for future artists, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. We're not here for rumors or clickbait. We're here to connect the dots, break down the facts, and give you the full picture that mainstream media avoids. New stories, deeper angles, and real conversations, all in one place. Share this video with someone who understands hip-hop beyond the surface. Someone who knows that behind every hit song is a business decision and sometimes a broken relationship. Because this story isn't over yet. And the next chapter might change how you see the industry forever.